Okay, we are back. All right, back. Okay, so the most of them have joined back. Let people join in a minute. Fine. So the most used DSLR exposure mode whenever you buy a DSLR and you use is something called as green color auto. It stands for A on a control panel. Most of the camera sellers or the people who are on a window, they generally show you everything as a result, as a quality, as how this is exactly compensating with the price, and everything being function on auto. So auto is that exposure mode which as a photographer you should be ashamed of. Matlab, the last thing you will ever use on DSLR is an auto mode. If you want to excel in photography, if you want to learn photography, the one thing you will never go and touch and trigger is an auto mode. Fine. In auto mode, as the name suggests, all those functions, all those decisions, all those uh, values which are otherwise embedded in photographer or a mind, or the decisions which an author is supposed to take, are finally taken by a camera itself. So merely what you remain is a person who can click or probably use this finger for clicking images, and people feel good about it as well. But if you ask me, auto is something which you need to avoid all the time. Fine. You will never be able to learn photography if you're ever going to use auto. Uh, uh, as I said, nothing can be done when there is an auto. You're focusing your say you're focusing points, your aperture, your shutter, your ISO, your metering. Everything is taken care by it's obviously by a camera and a sensor. So avoid auto, though it's an exposure mode in camera, which I had to mention. Avoid auto all the time. uh, Again, number two, I would rather suggest this as well to avoid in the circumstances. Uh, Most of the situations or most of the camera manufacturers have this a mode called programmable automatic or programmed auto. Fine. Many of the DSLRs might not have something like programmable automatic or programmable auto as well. That's a possibility, but it's denoted by P, the letter capital P. So that that's programmable auto. Now, if you ask me the difference between auto and programmable auto or program mode, say if it is a Nikon and a Canon, where most of the people these days use Nikon, Canon, or Sony, they don't no more say programmable auto. They just say P. So the moment we say P, what exactly and how it is exactly different from auto. So just understand the difference, that in auto, camera doesn't allow you to invest your brain even for one decision. Maybe in programmable auto, fine, I'm specifically saying maybe, in programmable auto, there is a possibility that camera will allow you to override the decisions which camera has taken. For example, in certain situations, in certain cameras of certain manufacturers, uh, programmable auto may give you or may allow you to use one or two angles which overrides auto. So instead of camera taking all the decisions, there are two decisions, or there are three decisions, or there is one decision which you can take. Now, which one you decide, or which one camera may decide. So even that is not fixed. So programmable auto is something which is equal to auto but not auto. So there is one or two decision which might be decided by camera manufacturer ki okay, in programmable auto, let's override this and give this as a different function. But otherwise, auto and programmable auto, on my personal recommendation, stay away from both the situations. Fine, there are cameras which allows you to go for P function and actually allows you to figure out two or three overriding situations. In that situation, a recommendation would be that if you are lazy enough, or if you are lazy from a nature, that okay, now I don't want to spend a lot of brain on what to choose and what settings I'm gonna be using, so let just camera decide everything and I'll see what is to be done in edit. At that point of time, if you feel you're lazy on that day, on certain point of time, go for programmable auto only if it allows you to override two or three situations, which is again rarely in entry level DSLR. For high end DSLR, they might allow two or three angles, but otherwise just completely avoid auto, green auto, or programmable P auto. Fine. So exposure mode number 1 was auto. Exposure mode number 2 was programmable auto. Now let's come back to exposure mode number 3. Mode number 3 is one of my favorite exposure mode. Obviously, we use them a lot when it comes to wildlife as well. The mode is called aperture priority or aperture value. Fine, it's denoted as capital A or AV. A capital, V small. If it is Canon, you will see AV. If it is Nikon or Sony or anything else, you will see A. So what happens exactly in aperture priority is uh, rest all things remaining constant. When I'm saying this, rest all things means your ISO and your shutter staying constant. ISO is obviously, as we decided, we'll set the ISO on 100, and the shutter is decided by camera. You get an opportunity only to change the aperture as per your requirement. So the light quantity, aperture priority, which means a light quantity, is decided by an author, but the motion, the time for which the shutter is going to remain open is decided by camera itself. So actually, in this situations, what are you asking camera, or what are you looking out of a camera, is the quantity is decided by me, but depending on the subject motion, you decide the subject. So this is the safest way to use camera. Say motion of the subject is something which you and me cannot meter, we cannot scale. There is no parameter for that subject which is passing on. Say a flying bird, obviously there might be speedometer, but we don't use speedometer when it comes to photography. Fine, by the time the subject will move out of our frame. So when it is all the time is here, the calculation is here on a speculative motive that this might be the right shutter speed, aperture priority is the best exposure mode when it comes to deciding on the motion of the subject. Only if there is a motion to the subject. If there is no motion, the subject is still, the subject is standard, it has not been moving, I would ask, or rather I would recommend that one should probably avoid using aperture priority. Fine. So the moment there is a motion, go for aperture priority modes or aperture value modes. Decide the quantity according to the lens or according to the requirement of light or through the ambience, and then you can use this. Rest all things will be taken care by camera itself. And you will be surprised that when you actually start using this mode, the the, the right calculation of that motion, the right details of that subject, the right exposure out of that frame starts coming out, just because you have only decided the quantity, the ring
F number. But rest all things are
then decided by specifically by the camera. So it gives you that added advantage of using that sensor to the best possible output. You can compare the output which is there by, say, a manual exposure mode, and the output which is there by an aperture priority mode, and you will see the lovely difference, the crisp and the lovely sharp images, the right amount of aperture as well, as you decide the aperture, so your focal area of the image as well. So it becomes extremely easy to deal with the situation where aperture priority is used. Uh, for wildlife, 100%. For motion photography, yes. Where you feel okay, aperture priority is used is when you understand aperture properly. At the same time, you understand the motion of the subject. There has to be some speculation about the subject motion. Fine. So exposure mode number one was auto. Exposure mode number two was programmable auto. You may forget these two, but never forget something like aperture priority or aperture value. Aperture priority is something which you should 100% try if you get an possible option to try on your cameras probably in next 1 week. The fourth mode I'm coming to on an exposure is shutter priority, or also known as time value mode. Is denoted on control panel as S, capital S, or if it is Canon, it is going to be TV, capital T and small v. So time value or shutter priority. So as I just mentioned, just like in aperture priority, aperture can be settled by author, or aperture can be set by an author. In shutter priority, the shutter can be set by an author. Fine. So the aperture will be decided by camera. So again, if we go back an hour back or last 45 minutes back, if you consider your ISO to be of highest standard possible, the only decision in last two exposure modes is going to be either shutter or aperture. So the rest of the things can be easily taken care by the camera and the power of the sensor itself. I can see people joining. Hi Raghu, I hope you're good. Photographers as well joining. Fantastic, good sign is this. Okay, so number one is auto mode, number two is programmable auto, number three is aperture priority or aperture value, number four is shutter priority or time value, number five is the mode which most of the photographers use, including me. And obviously everyone loves freedom. Everyone wants to use whatever functions which are there in camera, whatever things which are there in camera. And obviously, yeah, absolutely right, Ishan, it's a manual mode. So if you're taking a DSLR and if you're not shooting on manual mode, it's a crime. It's a crime of a very high nature when it comes to camera and photographers fraternity, that if someone is not using manual mode, then you should not be even buying a DSLR. That when you want to make sure that you want to learn, when you want to make sure that you want to take all those decisions manually, the manual mode is the mode you should look for. So in manual mode, you can decide, exposure compensation, you can decide ISO, shutter, aperture, the way in which you want to deal with. And the best way to use manual mode is trial and error. So if you feel the photos are not right, it's going overexposed, it's going underexposed, trial and error, observation, patience, and your patience to deal with your gadget at particular amount of time is going to take you to next level of manual. That at a time when you understand manual, at a time when you analyze manual, at a time when you start strategizing manual, when you start strategizing your manual mode, at that time you can consider, okay, now this is a time you can actually make images. Fine. What happens from auto mode is camera take images, we don't take images, camera take images. The moment you come to manual mode, the author takes decision, the author takes a steering wheel in hand. Authors gear the, say, aperture, or gear the ISO, or ungear the shutter. So it's completely all decisions which are taken whether for good, whether on conscious, whether on say randomly or with some speculation or with some thought process, these are all on auto mode. So number one, auto, sorry, on manual mode. Number one, auto. Number two, programmable auto. Number three, aperture priority. Number four, shutter priority. Number five is manual. And last but not the least, the exposure mode, which is generally hidden inside camera at the far end of the shutter speed, is known as bulb mode. Now, most of the situations people don't even know about. If you go and Google about this mode, bulb mode is actually not a shutter speed. Fine, it's not a shutter speed, it's a mode. Bulb mode have been there since ages, since the time the traditional photography concepts have been there, and it's an exposure mode. The exposure mode where the time is decided, by an author. So if I want to make an exposure of 30 seconds, 50 seconds, 5 minutes, 7 minutes, 10 minutes, 1 hour, 1.5 hour, completely on me. Fine. So bulb mode is the mode where your shutter speed is not limited. Fine, your shutter speed is not limited. The bulb mode is the mode where your shutter can remain open forever. When I say forever, at the time till the time your battery is going to last. Fine, your shutter is going to remain open. Don't use bulb mode without any guidance. Fine, don't use it. It might heaten up your camera. It may just screw your camera. The way in which वो अगरबत्ती का धुआं आता है वैसा शायद धुआं आने लगे. So if you don't have a right guide for using bulb mode who's gonna be around, don't ever try for bulb mode. It actually creates pink pixels. It actually creates a lot of problems as well. A sensor might get issues, a camera might heat up, a camera might malfunction at a point of time, and then there will be issue with the gadget in particular. So make sure you're using your bulb mode only under observation. Go and check some good YouTube videos which are authenticated either by manufacturer, say Nikon videos or Canon videos, and not by some Tom, Dick and Harry who is there on a YouTube as an influencer and dealing with videos, because his understanding for camera is from the point of view of his video and not from the science part of that gadget. So how much to exploit the gadget is completely a decision of yours, but conditions apply. As I said, go to a manufacturer website, look for that function and see some videos for a basic guidance. But I would recommend a personal guidance or a mentor is always better to be there in order to understand this bulb mode in a best possible manner. So here we come to the end of topic number 2, roughly moving to topic number 3, and which is nothing but a heart, soul, and what you say, everything about photography when it comes to me. I can talk for days and I can talk for months and weeks and years when it comes to a topic like this. But quickly, if we have to, wrap up the session, and with the 2 more topics to, I won't say cover topics, but uncover those topics. Composition is something, as I said, it's a heart, it's a brain, it's a soul of any photograph. Fine. Most of the compositions which we see or which we understand as a composition are visually appealing. They are, nothing but, a simple words. It's a decision about inclusion. It's a decision about exclusion. And it's a decision about arrangement of certain specific elements in photograph. So, one has to be very sure that what type of elements I'm gonna keep in my photograph, what type of elements I'm gonna exclude from my photograph, and if there are those elements in photograph, how I'm gonna arrange them. Where is the position gonna be? Say, for example, let me quickly ask you one question. Say, since childhood, we have been probably taking images of, say, a sunrise or a sunset, or when we actually go on, say, vacation or somewhere, we actually click some flowers, and elements like that. The primary images which we make is to make sure that, say, if there is a horizontal frame, can you all tell me where is the position of sun of you shooting a sunrise or a sunset or maybe a flower? Where is the position of the sun, say in a frame, or maybe it's a vertical frame or a horizontal frame? Where is the position of the sun? I have something to show you as a composition element as well, but I want you to answer that where you generally see a position of sun. Can anyone tell me? Say since childhood you have been shooting sunrise and sunsets and flowers. Any vacation you go, mountain, sunrise, sunset is always there. So just tell me where exactly is the position of that sun which you are trying to capture, or you have captured, and you will actually see the lot of stock of those sunrise and sunsets, to be frank. Sudeep says 1/3 position of the frame. Fair. No, I'm saying from the point of view of childhood, say your childhood memories, go back to your albums, centrally located, as someone said, centrally located. Fantastic. Okay, I'm going to give you reference what exactly you mean by centrally located. I want some more answers. Let's see if we get some more answers. Namrata says somewhere near the center of the frame. Perfect. Superb. And that is what been happening since ages, even with me. So just look at this. Say if it is a horizontal frame, can you actually see 9 blocks? Block 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. And if it is a horizontal frame, here is your sun. Am I right? Center? Yeah. Perfect. So here is going to be your sun. Now, when it comes to composition rules, the composition rules very specific. They are not the rules of science. They are not specifically rules of science. Sun, yeah, Vedant said sun at dead center, but on a lower end of the frame. Bang on, Vedant. Even I have been using stuff like this, or doing stuff like this since the time I have to use, Kodak KB10, Kodak Chroma and stuff like that. These are all box cameras which I used before I learned photography. But exactly the center, the dead center, and the parents used to tell us, okay, there, you're supposed to click like that. And you were even rewarded when you make images like that, So that is how it is. But when it comes to composition rules or compositions, the rules are not like the rules of physics or the rules of, say, chemistry. These are generally accepted, principles. These are generally accepted guidelines. These are generally accepted aesthetic values where European photographers have come up with, Russian photographers have come up with, some photography philosophers have been coming over this. And it's specifically an art of reading photograph that how absolutely Rugved. I can't count how many of roles I have wasted on KB10 and Kodak Chroma. There is no count to it. Absolutely right. So coming back to composition, that the rules are not specifically scientific rules, but rules are accepted. Rules have values. Rules are appealing. Rules have a visual design in the same. Say photography, it's an art. It's a visual art. So obviously the visual design rules will apply. Fine. So the painters, the scientists, the mathematicians initially started utilizing this visual design, and finally they settled down on certain type of rules, as the rules where the subject or the elements in frame needs to be kept. Fine. A simple composition rule, as we begin with, is a rule of thirds. The rule number 1, and a bread and butter rule for every photographer is, say if you have a subject here, say if this is going to be my frame, the rule of thirds, again, it's not a rule of third, it's a rule of thirds. So rule of thirds says, say if there are blocks, the blocks like these are 9 blocks. Say, let me put it this way, this is better. I guess with the the use of Instagram, everyone loves vertical frames. So if this is gonna be the frame, fine, okay, I hope you will be able to see the 9 blocks. So for the purpose, I generally name these blocks as A1, A2, A3. the center line is B1, B2, B3, and the bottom line is C1, C2, C3. If it is horizontal. If it is vertical, then A1, A2, A3, B1, B2, B3, C1, C2, C3. Fine. If these are the blocks, now as per composition rule, composition says, rule of third says, your element or your subject or your elements, there can be more than two subjects in a frame. One might be important, second might be lesser important. Fine, there can be more than two as well. That's completely possible. But let's understand one subject, say a portrait or a landscape. Fine, let's understand one subject. So if that one subject is one is going to capture, say for example, tiger or a bird or anything else, and the subject is understood. Okay, this is going to be my subject. That subject has to be, Rugved, I'll come back to you on this note on that for sure. That subject has to be either, again, there is a choice given by the rules as well, either along the lines or at lines or the point where line intersects. So if you have noticed, whether it is vertical, whether it is horizontal, there are four intersection points. Intersection 1, 2, 3 and 4. Four intersection points. So an image is considered to be a highly or nicely composed image only when the subject, element or elements are along the lines. So there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 4 lines, or the point at which the lines intersect. So either at four intersection points or at the lines. Now the moment we say the rule says something like this, our B2 comes into play. B2 is this I'm referring to. The dead center where we all grown up making lovely sunsets, lovely flower images and got lovely rewards from our parents. Fine. So the rule says it has to be along the lines or on intersection points. Now to begin your compositions, which is a conscious effort, guys. Composition is not something कि आपको मटका लग गया composition. It's not composition. Photo आता नहीं है. You make images. You make one. Fine. And for that you consciously attempt to make sure that it is aesthetically good. Fine. So when it Sudeep, I'm gonna come back to rule of simplification after this. So horizon simplification is rule number 2 for sure. So when it comes to the rule of composition, when it comes to this, what we do is let's flip the side again. So instead of considering this rule from along the lines and at intersection point, just keep in mind wherever you keep or click a subject or make an image, your image should be off center. Your image should, or your subject should never come in box B2. Now whenever you make that whenever your subject is never appears in B2, you need to make sure that it has to be along the lines or at some intersection point. Now most of the cameras, whether it is DSLR or mobile cameras, allows you to use the grid lines. People think grid lines are used for different purposes. One of the purpose, the main purpose for use grid lines is to understand the composition. The second purpose is to understand the skyline or a horizon, the horizon line. When horizon line or horizon line, as we say, fine. So tilted nahi dikhna chahiye, sky ulta fulta nahi dikhna chahiye. So that grid line is actually our guiding parameter, that it has to be along the ground. So wherever we are using the rules of composition, make sure nothing comes in center B2 box. If you avoid that box, you will be marginally going towards the journey of rightly composed image. Fine. Now if you go further and if you want to make another kick-ass image or another kick-ass say a composition, make sure where are your intersection points in grid. आपके intersection points अगर आपको सही पता है, go ahead, place the subject on intersection point and frame it. That is also another way to compose right and amazing images. Your rule number 2 is horizontal placement or simplified horizontal placement, as I said. So whenever you are clicking landscape, travel photographers, landscape is something which is bread and butter. We want to post amazing landscape. So whenever we are clicking a landscape specifically comprises of 3 elements. One is a landmass, the land. Second is a horizontal where the mountain starts. And third is the journey of sky. Fine. So whenever you are making images like say something like that, you need to make sure that either of skyline or the landmass has to be on a 1/3 side. Say I have got another thing to deal with. Say I have made one something like this. The highlighted part is a sky part. Say a landscape image in a horizontal way. Fine, or a vertical way. Anyways it goes. So if this is gonna be your sky part, you need to make sure you're 2/3 of the image. So you are not supposed to divide image or bisect the image. You're not supposed to have a bisect or divide image. You need to make sure that the 1/3 part is of sky and 2/3 part is of mountain plus the landmass. Now this is approach number 1. Or there can be approach like this as well. Fine, there can be approach like this as well. Say if you are not so sure about what type of images, say agar wo vertical image hai, you can even go for something like this. Say something like this. Say your landmass part is 1/3 and this is your 2/3. So 2/3 will be nothing but a mountain range and the sky. Fine. Again, you're not supposed to scale with this. Actually, you can't scale the rules. It is not even expected to scale the rules. कि अरे ये 1/3 से ना थोड़ा 10% 20% नीचे आया ऊपर गया. It's completely fine. Fine. You're not supposed to be coming up with a scale कि it has to be 1/3 exact, but it has to look 1/3 and 2/3. Fine. So the simplified or horizontal placement rule is pretty clear. First one was a rule of thirds. Second one was obviously horizontal placement. A third one, or the most crucial one, which is these days running on Instagram like hell, is the rule of simple exclusion. Say बहुत बार ऐसा होता है, the most of the time, in fact, it does happen with me as well, that there are a lot of elements. There is element 1, there is element 2, the element 3, element 4, element 5. बहुत सारे elements एक frame में आ जाते हैं. And then comes the situation that there is an ambiguity. That where should I focus? On which subject should I focus? Which one I should be keeping next? Which one I should include? Which one I should exclude? So, meanwhile, even in this, there is a possibility that there might be dominating backgrounds, automatic contrast. ये भी situations आती है. So, in order to deal with these situations, you need to make sure that the objects which create an ambiguity, the objects which create a lot of confusion, avoid. As an author, you have the full right to make that decision that what is going to be your primary subject. And in case there are secondary subjects, you need to make sure that those subjects are excluded from the area of focus. This is called a rule of simplification. So in order to simplify your image, the author takes the 100% discretionary decision. Now, after looking at the image, if the viewer thinks that the image is still ambiguous, now I would say this is a completely, I would say a responsibility of an author that he projects himself with a focus. So if there is an ambiguity, the ambiguity actually due to the execution part of the focus. So if you are very sure on your mind that this is going to be the way in which you are going to make image, so this is the way the images are made. So there is a confusion, clarify the confusion, focus on the subject, go for it. There will not be ever any ambiguity when it comes to if you follow the rules properly. Fine. Okay. लालची भी बनता है मन इसमें. that there is a possibility that you might feel, yeah, you need this, you need a lovely sky, then there is some motion, then some disturbance in the foreground, and you want to make the colorful images in order to show on a social media. Fair. Then that's not an image. Fine, you're trying to doctor certain things, you're trying to mock up certain things, in which case the actual subject loses the focus like anything. And at a point of time, in case actually making that image, you actually screw that digital content as well. It might look visually appealing, I don't disagree to the situation, it might look visually appealing, but then it doesn't consider or fit in a form of composition. It doesn't, this doesn't have the what you say, a fitness certificate for a for a composition. So avoid that. Rather keep your subjects to minimum and focus on the most important subject as per you. It's absolutely your projection as an author. My fourth rule is something which you can learn on your own on maybe YouTube or on a Google. Uh, the rule is called a golden rule of composition. Now, the most consumed portrait of the fine art or visual art till date is the portrait of Mona Lisa. So I would recommend something like this, because this is one of the complex composition rule, I would most say, one of the most complex rule to understand, one of the most complex rule to even execute. Even professional photographers are not generally after this rule, but I would have to mention, as we are covering composition, that this rule is called golden rule. You may Google about golden rule and Mona Lisa. You can Google about this, you will get hundreds of videos, and then you can learn it on your own. Because to express or even to start this rule, I'll require a lot of what you say, art of visual reading. The photographers are highly acclaimed visual readers. They read a lot of photographs and then they make images. So you need to go to exhibitions, you need to go to understand what is fine art, what is basic visual arts, visual designs, and then you can probably implement something like golden rule. So I'm not going to spend a lot of time, but this is something like a homework from my side to you, that you can go back and check Mona Lisa and the golden rule, and you will be amazed why Mona Lisa being consumed or visually consumed as so much in last century. You may go and check that golden rules for yourself. It's completely driven by the painters, the philosophers, mathematicians, the people who were fantastic when the visual designing were there, and they have defined these rules. Fine. Other rules, obviously, there are other set of rules as well, but they are not greatly important when it comes to the photography compositions, but they are recognized generally. The rules say something like the rule of symmetry breaking. You can note down if you want, or you can go back to this video in IGTV and you can check this out again. So rule of something like symmetry breaking, following symmetry and breaking that symmetry. The rule of patterns, when you follow the patterns which are available with you. The rule of using frames within frames. So there are frames available, use those frames. It adds 100% of visual value. The rule of the direction. Say, for example, if I have to go back on this, say if I go back on this, the rule of direction. Say if this is my rule or this is my frame, the rule of direction says if this is going to be the portrait, if my portrait is here, say if my model is here on this line, fine. So if the model faces the direction on this way, the 2/3 space has to be left here. So that's how you consider, and 1/3 space at the back of the model. So for example, if I'm gonna consider uh, Ishan, that's not necessary. That symmetry is something uh, which have repeating pattern or repeating specification or repetitive design, repetitive visual design. That's what we understand as a symmetry. Why we say to break the symmetry, that photographers look for the tension point. You need to make sure that the tension point in a symmetry is where the symmetry is broken. Fine. You Google more about symmetry breaking rule. There are lovely handles on Instagram which even I follow for symmetry images. The handles like Symmetry Hunters. Please go and check Symmetry Hunters. It's one of the lovely visually appealing images the handles puts up, the repost, the feature as well. Symmetry Hunters is one of the finest handles, or even you can just go and Google symmetry breaking rule of photography. It's lovely. The tension point is the key when it comes to symmetry. So coming back on the portrait and the rule. So if this is gonna be my position and if my direction is towards this, the space, say currently this is gonna be my frame. So this space is 2/3 and this space is 1/3. So this has to be the ratio. So if it is a portrait, so where am I having my direction has to have more space as compared to the negative space. So this is negative and this becomes positive. The moment I turned this way, this becomes negative and this becomes positive. So all the time the direction has to be followed like this. So it cannot be, say, if in a frame, if I'm going, so this is the end of the frame, and if I'm like this, so that is not considered as a rule followed picture. So a portrait with something like this, we call it the portrait which can't breathe. The portrait जो सांस नहीं ले सकता, the portrait need a breathing space. So this actually gives a breathing space, and that happens with the subjects as well. Fine, that has to happen with the subjects as well. So going back to this, the rule of breathing space, the rule of directions in a subject. The rules are obviously, there are certain multiple rules by Europeans, there are certain multiple rules by Russians, and they are philosophies even for paintings which they use. But roughly, these are the rules where we settle down. Please also note there is one rule as a travel photographer or a landscape photographer you would always like to know is a rule of leading lines. You know, people love shapes, people love lines, people love circles, people loves horizontal lines, people love different zigzag lines, S curve, C curve, and the shapes which defines your image. So there are rules according to that as well. You may even read more about these type of rules. These are completely philosophical, what you say, the values of a composition. I guess I'm getting one question. Yeah, what about food photography when we have more than one focus point? Wow. Specifically now, when if it is a food photography, the type of equipment which people use is obviously good macro lenses, or the lenses which probably allows you to focus on obviously on that one target. It cannot have multiple focus. But then what food photographers are being doing since last so many years is they stack images. Say, as the doubt says, that what if there is a multiple focus point, say if there is a say an ice cream or say a softie, and you need to focus on the cone as well as the actual ice cream. Find the ice cream content as well as the cone. Then your focal distance is huge, and then you cannot use very shallow, very narrow depth of fields as well, because you need a good lighting as well. So in that situation, what people do, they stack images. So what they do, they take one image where the focus is on ice cream as a content, one image where the focus is on ice cream and cone intersection, and then there will be third image which is on the cone itself. So likewise, when they have three images, they stack it up together, they attach it together. Stacking is one feature in Photoshop you will get, or in Lightroom you will get. Fine, it's completely easy to understand what is photo stacking. You can Google about it. There are lovely videos available for photo stacking. You stack up those images. Photoshop and Lightroom, I would say rather recommend Photoshop. Photoshop actually stack 100% error free. So it doesn't look like stacked image at all. And as the doubt mentioned that you need multiple focus point, your whole food in that case comes into focal plane as well, or focal point as well. Fine. Okay, I'm going ahead. So I hope I just go quickly once again on all the composition rules. The first rule we started off with, obviously the rule of thirds. The second rule we saw was horizontal placement. The third one was rule of simple exclusion inclusion. The fourth one I gave you as homework as golden rule. The fifth one was symmetry, patterns, then comes leading lines, then come breathing space, the direction, then frames within frame, and lot many like that. Uh, so that ends up our composition part. Now we need some more 4 to 5 minutes to wrap this up very quickly. As we mentioned, we are going to end in 1.5 hours, so we have roughly 10 minutes more. I guess we have already crossed that. We have already crossed that. But let me just take 5 more minutes to deal with this. Our topic number 4. Okay, anything related to composition, you can write to me anytime. Uh, you can write to Travers, DM on Travers. I'll be more than happy to answer anything regarding composition. On a personal note, I love compositions way beyond anything. I keep reading about them. I keep visiting galleries. I keep visiting the philosophies of painters, fine artists, fine art artists, the sculptors, and whatever visual mediums I could consume. I keep doing that, and probably that is how the compositions are probably understood the best. The fourth topic for the day was obviously live view versus viewfinder. The moment you have DSLR, you obviously tend to look out for all those flipping screens all the time, because you feel okay, ye kaun aap ko lagayega. The people who are with specs or lenses, they try to first go for that viewfinder. But I would suggest that if your frame is pretty straightforward, if it is landscape, it doesn't involve a lot of complex elements. The position of the frame is below the shoulder if you're seeing something like here, and if the frame is probably asking for not great detail, then I would say the live view is the most recommended tool. The moment you see the frame which is of a complex nature, which require highly accurate detailing, which requires segregation, which requires isolation, and there are many other elements which are there, which is probably might be able to create an ambiguity as well. So I would then recommend you go for the viewfinder. Whenever you're using viewfinder or whenever you're using live view, make sure in both the situations your grid lines inside that need to be inserted. So your grid lines has to be there. Even if it is a viewfinder, you make sure there is a grid line you will be able to see via your viewfinder, or even if it is a live view matter, so you should be able to see the grid lines as well. So make sure the grid lines are never missing from your any of the format. But completely on your call. Again, if it is very specific to go for something like spot focus or center focus, I would recommend to go for viewfinder. Most of the image makers, most of the photographers are highly comfortable using viewfinders, because the gadget is also made, or ergonomics of the gadgets are also made to so that you can attach it to your eye and you get the details or you get the perfect focus. So if your perfect focus is gonna be the key, the uh, something like this, then I would say stick to viewfinder. Okay, occasionally if you feel it's better to shoot, if something from below the shoulder is possible, go for live view, but stick to viewfinder as far as possible. Moving on to our last topic. Now this is all about your projection and the interest one can take in this, because yes, Rugved, absolutely. Shooting a flying bird in a live view, it's gonna be challenge. I guess Sanchit has, I could see the Sanchit has joined. So it's gonna be difficult. Say Sanchit is one of the finest wedding photographers I've taught sometime, and he make amazing images. So he understand the value of viewfinder. Say focusing in a pre-wedding, focusing in a wedding, or focusing on a specific shots when the wedding photography is happening. It's completely important to make sure that how you use your viewfinder, because you need that spot focusing. That spot is what you say, the golden spot where your images actually starts creating tension from the issue of visual art. That is how the images are valued a lot. They're commercially valued a lot. Fine, obviously. uh, uh, the last pattern I could see now, what we are supposed to discuss is the the angles and the perspective for your social media. Say there's a social media. When it comes to social media, the whole of the photography social media is almost moving towards Instagram. There are some social media. There is so much social media obviously present in Facebook. I don't deny that, but the photographer's social media is moving towards Instagram a lot. Now Instagram, obviously, the 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 platform itself is made for vertical frames. Now most of the photographers obviously don't like vertical frames, because what all traditionally have been taught is the traditional pattern of horizontal frames, and when it suddenly comes to vertical frames, it's a great ambiguity. Say, even if you want to make a story, it has to be vertical. Even if it is a post, the maximum space you can use on Instagram is vertical. So it becomes something, what you say, an uncomfortable situation when people ask for a landscape which is vertical. But considering the social media, you can make images, or you can make the digital content as exciting as you can. But just to make sure that every 6 months or every 8 months or any year, keep checking the definitions. Fine. So for story, there is a different definition for pixels, for resolution, for the quality. For post, there is a horizontal post, there is a different resolution. For vertical post, there is a different resolution. For square post, say IGTV, uh, what you say, a, a display picture, there is a specific square which you require. Or maybe for your display pics on WhatsApp, they are very important. Your status on WhatsApp, your cover page on a Facebook page, say your post on a Facebook, your album cover on a Facebook, the first 3 4 images which you are going to put up on a Facebook as an album, what are those images you are supposed to pick? So this all keeps on changing year after year, and you need to make sure that you actually Google about it, get your resolutions right, get your quality right, and just make certain presets in your Photoshop. So those Photoshop presets will actually allow you to, and actually give them names. Absolutely right. Yeah, Rugved, this is absolutely right. I must agree on that. So, need not necessarily that photographers probably agree to certain compositions being on vertical, because if you ask me, I love horizontal frame. If you ask any photographer who is, even learning photography, he would any day go for horizontal frame. Vertical is something a need of time. I don't deny that. Vertical is something which is suitable for phone. The phone is designed vertically. Hence, the visual art has changed. I would say, when it comes to the commercial value, when it comes to the appeal, when it comes to traction, when it comes to engagement, and the visual attractiveness. So people think the moment it is visual, which is vertical, it is amazing, it looks amazing, because it's easy, it's getting famous, it's getting recognition, it's being yes, Sudeep. Editing, I would rather suggest, for any post processing or editing, uh, Photoshop or Lightroom, if you are using your desktop. If you are using, say, your cell phone, you will require a little patience in order to understand what apps gives you. The apps which I would recommend you is Lightroom Mobile. It's one of the finest app I have seen when it comes to uh, mobile based editing. Second app I would recommend is Snapseed by Google. Fine. Lightroom with certain limited features is free. Snapseed is completely free. Please go and also check Snapseed and Lightroom videos. Again, those videos are spectacular, because from almost no or useless image, say they go to the image which is spectacular, wow, ऐसे image तक जाते हैं, but then they have a lot of patience, they exploit a lot of things, but a fundamental post processing can be easily done in mobile based on a Lightroom or a Snapseed. These are the most recommended app. Stay away from filters. I would recommend stay away from filters. Filters reduces the quality. Filters most of the times reduces the quality. Ishan has a question. Can explain the hobby photographer's kit. I have 1855, 55, 250, 70, 400. Mostly I do is food and wildlife. Is 50 necessary? Ishan, let me tell you, whether it is Nikon, whether it is Canon, whether it is Sony, 50 lens is considered to be bread and butter lens. Whether you do portrait, whether you do street, whether you do product, whether you do say something like say even landscape, people use 50 for landscape. Now obviously, the moment you say 50 it is 1.8 lens. It gives you amazing depth of aperture. It gives you the shallow aperture for obviously which you require for your food in order to create a drama in food images. But 50 is something which you should generally buy when you buy a kit. 50 1.8 is completely required. Okay, if you are gonna be only sticking to something like food, I would recommend you, instead of going for 50 go for a good macro lens. A macro lens will probably give you that output quality of 1:1, because what we are seeing 50 70, 400, 55, 250, these are all lenses which are not 1:1 lenses. These are 1:1 a different ratio lenses. Yes, Sudeep, probably at the end of June or the first week of July, as we will not be able to travel or trek in the way in which we otherwise travel or trek. I guess I'll be designing one mobile based editing workshop, and at that point of time, I hope I should be able to share my screen on this. I'm working on IG screen and screen sharing via some third party applications. Let's see, but editing workshop 100% it's coming very soon. I am on the design of the same. And again, Ishan, the moment you take 50 you will suddenly see the improvement in your vision of photography, the freedom of aperture from say 3.5 of or 4.5 of your 18 to the 1.5. Suddenly you will start realizing why I have not bought this lens prior. Zoom class. Vedan, I'm unsure about Zoom coming to IG. I have a Zoom license version. That's not a problem at all. Maybe Zoom via Facebook. I have heard it's fantastic. But as you said, Zoom class, completely fine. Uh, we'll discuss amongst our volunteers, and if 100 people can join in with the Zoom ID, we are completely on, and I can absolutely share the screen and we can take the Zoom class. It's completely fine. I'll recommend this to a team very soon. Fantastic. Vedan, this is noted. Okay. Any more questions? I guess we are running out of time. Maybe 3 or 5 minutes more to complete this. You can zoom and share screen of mobile. Yeah, completely. That's also possible, but I'm not so comfortable. Probably zoom and share screen. This is something innovative. Even I have to practice once. But Ishan, this is noted. I'll try this once. That how on Snapseed or how on Lightroom mobile I put a zoom, and then that. Okay. I'll try this. I'll try this for sure. This is something absolutely noteworthy. I guess we had one question from the last session, which I guess meanwhile I answered. But in case you have question, you can keep this on the thread of IGTV, or you can DM. It's completely fine. We'll get back to you with the proper answer. Uh, hope I guess we should be able to see each other on a travel or a trek soon, and hope this unlock ends soon, and hope this pandemic ends soon. You take good care of yourself. Keep your social patience. Keep physical distance. Fine. Thank you. Thank you very much.